One nation, two wars, 25 years apart. In 1914, one army fights the entire world for 4 years and nearly wins. In 1939, another army conquers half of Europe in 2 years, then collapses so completely that the country ceases to exist. Both shared the same German efficiency. Both followed the same military tradition. The assumption is common. People believe Nazi Germany in 1939 was stronger than Imperial Germany in 1914. Better technology, advanced tactics, blitzkrieg versus trench warfare. But the numbers tell a different story. Industrial capacity reveals a different truth. When everything went wrong, one Germany could sustain itself while the other could not. How did a supposedly modern superpower fail so fast? At first glance, an unstoppable war machine, but in reality, a fragile shell. Look at the footage. You see Nazi Germany rolling into Poland. Panzer divisions move across the border. Stukas scream overhead. This looks like the future of warfare. Now, the camera zooms out. Right behind those tanks, 750,000 horses pull supply wagons. The sound of hooves on pavement, the smell of animal waste. Horses were the backbone of the Wehrmacht in 1939. This image reveals the gap between real power and the illusion of power. But this was only the beginning. August 1914. Germany mobilizes for war. The Kaiser's army was a professional monolith. It didn't just have soldiers, it had a massive industrial base that outperformed every rival in Europe. The steel mills of the Ruhr worked around the clock. The chemical plants produced explosives at a rate the world had never seen. The frame shows millions of men boarding trains. It was a clockwork operation. No one dared to break the schedule. By contrast, the 1939 mobilization was a gamble. The economy was already redlining. There were no deep reserves of raw materials. The warehouses were half empty. Hitler had the toys, but he lacked the batteries to keep them running for a long fight. Events accelerated. In 1914, the German Empire was the second largest economy on Earth. It surpassed Britain in steel production. It led the world in science and medicine. When the war started, Germany was a rising titan. In 1939, Germany was a debtor nation. It survived on looted gold and forced labor. The Nazi miracle was a house of cards built on credit. The military tradition remained, but the foundation was rotting from the inside. There was no turning back. The footage shows the difference in the soldiers' faces. In 1914, they were well-fed and equipped with the best gear money could buy. In 1939, the elite units looked sharp, but the infantry behind them often lacked basic motorized transport. The story starts with what each Germany actually looked like at the moment they crossed the border. Thus began the comparison. 1914. Germany holds the position of the second most powerful economy on the planet. Only the United States produces more goods. German industry dominates the European continent. 17.6 million tons of steel leave German mills every year. The competition is not even close. Britain produces 7.8 million tons. France manages 4.6 million. Russia lags behind at 4.2 million. How did one nation achieve such dominance? It wasn't just luck, it was engineering. Germany is the global leader in the chemical sector. Their factories produce everything from advanced synthetic dyes to pharmaceuticals and high-grade fertilizers. When international buyers want precision machinery, optical instruments, or electrical equipment, they look for the German stamp. The currency is backed by physical gold. Government debt remains under control. Banks are stable and liquid. The country is self-sufficient in coal and produces the vast majority of its own food supply. The military reflects this economic muscle. The peacetime army consists of 800,000 men. But the true strength lies in the reserves. The German High Command needs exactly 12 days to expand from 800,000 to 3.5 million soldiers. Total mobilization reaches 3.8 million men. The footage from the era shows a relentless machine. The rail network is the most advanced in Europe. It was purpose-built for one goal: moving entire armies to any border within days. Artillery pieces are modern, logistics are methodical, nothing is left to chance. But did they stand alone? At first glance, yes, But in reality, Berlin had partners. Germany has real allies. The Austro-Hungarian Empire adds 50 million people to the alliance. Its industrial capacity is limited compared to Germany, but it remains a factor. Most of Austria-Hungary is agricultural. Significant industry exists only in Bohemia and parts of Hungary. Still, it remains a great power with a capable military force. To the south, the Ottoman Empire provides massive geographic reach and untapped resources. The map was set, the machine was fueled, there was no turning back. September 1st, 1939. German tanks cross the Polish border. In London, massive crowds gather around newsstands to read the headlines in silence. In New York, the lights of Times Square flicker as thousands stop to watch the latest newsreels. The world is witnessing a new type of conflict. They call it blitzkrieg, lightning war. 5 weeks later, Poland ceases to exist. To every foreign observer, Germany looks like an unstoppable machine. But the newsreels hide the reality. The German Reich is running out of time. They aren't counting in years, but in months. The Nazi economy is a hollow shell supported by MIFO bills. This was a massive financial deception. The government hid 12 billion Reichsmarks in debt entirely off the books. It was a shell game designed to fund rearmament in total secrecy. By 1938, the numbers reached a breaking point. 12 billion Reichsmarks in MIFO bills sat against 19 billion in standard government bonds. Nearly 40% of the national debt was invisible. Now, these unreported debts are coming due. The creditors want their money. The German treasury is empty. Finance is only the first fracture. General Georg Thomas, Chief of Staff for the Army Weapons Office, begins a secret audit. He later becomes head of the Defense Economy and Armament Office. Before the invasion of Poland, he reviews the physical stockpiles. He examines the warehouses and the fuel depots. He counts the shells. Thomas delivers his report to General Halder. The findings are devastating. The German military only possesses 2 months of fuel oil and petrol. This is the entire supply for the invasion. The ammunition situation is equally critical. There's enough for a quick strike against a smaller neighbor. But for a prolonged European war, there is nothing. The footage shows the truth. Column after column of German infantry still relies on horse-drawn wagons. Only the tip of the spear is motorized. At first glance, a modern titan. But in reality, a nation on the verge of bankruptcy. It got worse. The German High Command knows the risks. If the war doesn't end quickly, the machinery of the Wehrmacht will simply stop moving. The gears will seize. The tanks will run dry. They are gambling the entire fate of the nation on a single desperate sprint. There was no turning back. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel reads the report. He does not ask questions. He suppresses the document and orders Georg Thomas to never speak of these findings again. The data is dangerous. Germany imports nearly all of its oil. It relies on foreign shipments for rubber, copper, and tungsten. Domestic production of iron ore fails to meet demand, forcing a total reliance on Swedish mines. Food rationing begins before the first shot is even fired. This is the hidden reality of September 1939. Why did Hitler invade Poland? It was not a show of strength. It was a race against time. The German economy was running out of oxygen. Either they conquer resources immediately or the entire state apparatus collapses. How did this compare to 1914? At first glance, a similar situation. But in reality, the foundations were different. When Great Britain launched a naval blockade in the First World War, Germany was cut off from the world. Yet they fought for 4 years. 4 years of endless artillery barrages, 4 years of feeding millions of soldiers on 2 massive fronts, 4 years of repairing railways and replacing hundreds of thousands of casualties. The footage shows the sheer scale of the industrial effort. Imperial Germany had a secret weapon, the Haber-Bosch process. This allowed them to synthesize ammonia for explosives. Without this pre-war chemical breakthrough, they would have run out of shells in months. They found substitutes for rubber. They rationed bread and meat brutally to keep the front lines moving. The difference was clear. Imperial Germany had economic depth. Nazi Germany had a stopwatch counting down to bankruptcy. Events accelerated. There is a detail the cameras missed during the invasion of Poland. The propaganda films show panzer divisions racing toward Warsaw. In the frame, steel and speed. But these tanks represented only a tiny fraction of the invasion force. The bulk of the Wehrmacht moved at the speed of 1914. In many cases, they were actually slower. The German war machine ran on animal power. Nearly 3 million horses and mules served the German army during the conflict. The numbers are staggering. On average, 1.1 million horses were in service at any given moment. By the end of the war, 750,000 of them were dead. The sound of hooves, not engines, defined the German advance. Why was the modern army using horse-drawn wagons? It was not a tactical choice. It was a sign of industrial failure. Germany could not afford to mechanize its infantry. They lacked the oil to fuel the trucks. They lacked the factories to build the chassis. They lacked the rubber to manufacture tires. The system was hollow from the start. Thus began the gamble. 1914. Imperial Germany moves its entire military machine by rail. They possess one of the most extensive railway networks on the planet. Every locomotive, every flat car, and every mile of track is manufactured in German factories. The system is built for one purpose: rapid military mobilization. It is fast, efficient, and requires no foreign fuel. 1939. Nazi Germany presents a different picture. Despite the propaganda of tiger tanks, the army still relies on millions of horses. Mechanization requires oil and rubber that the Reich simply does not have. The logistics are a bottleneck. Then there is the matter of the sea. In 1914, Imperial Germany has the second most powerful navy in the world. The High Seas Fleet features modern dreadnoughts. These massive steel ships can directly challenge the British Royal Navy. This fleet is the result of 20 years of construction and massive financial investment. Nazi Germany's navy in 1939 is a shadow by comparison. It consists of a handful of battleships and a few heavy cruisers. The submarine fleet is small. In the footage, Admiral Raeder appears tense. He repeatedly warns Hitler that Germany is not ready for a naval war with Britain. The German naval leadership has a strategy called Plan Z. It is a massive shipbuilding program designed to challenge British dominance, but the timeline is the problem. The schedule, approved in early 1939, explicitly sets the completion date for 1948. If war comes now, the Navy is helpless. All they can do is conduct limited raids and hope for the best. But General Halder proceeds with the invasion of Poland anyway. The reason is simple. The High Command does not plan for a long war. The strategy is a series of short, violent bursts. The goals are clear. Knock out Poland in weeks. Knock out France in weeks. Knock out the Soviet Union in weeks. Right on. The plan is to seize foreign resources before German stockpiles run dry. At first, it works. Poland falls in 5 weeks. France collapses in 6 weeks. Then comes the Soviet Union. General Halder, chief of the Army General Staff, keeps a detailed daily diary during the invasion. His early entries reflect total confidence. He writes that the Soviet front is collapsing. He believes victory is only a few weeks away. The camera shows German columns moving deep into the east. But the maps are too large. The distances are too great. By December, the tone of the diary changes completely. The cold sets in, the engines freeze, the horses die. The short war is over. A war of attrition has begun. There was no turning back. June 22, 1941. Germany invades the Soviet Union. 3 million soldiers cross the border. 3,000 tanks move east. 2,000 aircraft fill the sky. It is the largest military operation in history. The goal is simple. Destroy the Soviet Union in 6 to 8 weeks. Seize the grain in Ukraine. Capture the oil fields in the Caucasus. Take the factories in Western Russia. Then, Hitler plans to turn west and crush Britain. The footage from that summer shows a rapid advance, General Franz Halder writes in his diary. In July and August, his entries are confident, but there is a hidden tension in the text. Halder knows the logistics are a disaster. Fuel supplies are inadequate. Ammunition is insufficient for a long fight. The supply lines are stretched to the breaking point, but Hitler ignores the reports. He demands the offensive continue. By early December, German forces reach the outskirts of Moscow. They are only 12 miles from the city center. Officers stand in the snow and look through field glasses. They can see the spires of the Kremlin, but they cannot move forward. The soldiers are exhausted. The horses are dying. December 5th, 1941. The Soviet Union launches a massive counteroffensive. The timing is precise. The winter of 1941 to 1942 is the coldest in over 200 years. The mercury drops. Temperatures hit minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The camera records the reality of the front. German soldiers are wearing summer uniforms. They have no heavy coats or winter boots. Their equipment is not designed for the Arctic cold. Tank engines freeze solid. Rifle oil thickens into sludge. Weapons jam during firelights. The German army is paralyzed by the frost. Suddenly, new faces appear on the battlefield. These are fresh Siberian divisions. They are professional soldiers. They are trained for winter warfare. They wear white camouflage and thick furs. They carry submachine guns that do not jam in the cold. The German offensive stalls. Then, the retreat begins. Events accelerated. Nazi Germany faces a new reality. Hitler tried to avoid a stalemate. He wanted a quick victory. Instead, he is trapped in a long war of attrition. He is fighting an enemy that can replace every lost soldier. The German gamble failed. 4 years. That is how long Imperial Germany survived a total war. They faced Britain, France, Russia, and the United States simultaneously. This was a nation with deep resources and a structure that refused to buckle. The naval blockade cut off global trade entirely. Food disappeared, raw materials vanished. Yet, the front lines held. They managed a war on multiple fronts for 1,400 days. The collapse did not happen on the battlefield. The Hindenburg Line remained unbroken. German boots still occupied foreign soil in the east and west. What failed was the home front. Internal revolution dismantled the government from within. The political system shattered before the military did. Economically and militarily, the Kaiser's empire proved it could endure being outnumbered and isolated for years. Nazi Germany cannot survive 1 year of the same pressure. By 1944, the regime is scraping the bottom of the barrel. The footage shows the reality. Teenagers and elderly men in oversized uniforms. These are the last reserves. Fuel shortages paralyze the Wehrmacht. Aircraft stay grounded on dirt runways. Heavy tanks become stationary pillboxes because there is no gasoline to move them. Allied bombers strike the industrial heartland every hour of every day. The strategic map reveals a deeper failure. In 1914, Imperial Germany had functional allies. In 1939, Hitler stands alone. Japan is occupied with its own conquest in Asia. The distance is too great for coordination. Why didn't Japan help? It wasn't just geography. In June 1941, Germany invades the Soviet Union. Japan stays silent. They are looking south toward the Pacific and Southeast Asia. But there is a hidden reason for this hesitation. 1939, the Battle of Khalkhin Gol. Soviet armor crushed the Japanese forces in a decisive encounter. Tokyo learned a hard lesson. The Red Army was too dangerous to provoke again. The result was a neutrality pact. Japan signed the agreement with Moscow in April 1941. This happened only 2 months before the German invasion. Berlin expected a pincer movement. Instead, they got a diplomatic wall. Events accelerated. Germany found itself in a trap of its own making. There was no help coming from the east. There was no way to sustain the losses. The contrast is clear. One empire was built to endure. The other was a house of cards. Germany was now fighting the world's largest land power with its back to the wall. June 10, 1940. Benito Mussolini declares war on France and Great Britain. On paper, Italy is a global superpower. They control a massive standing army. They operate a modern navy in the Mediterranean. They hold vast colonial territories across Africa. But reality is different. Italy does not help Germany. Instead, Italy becomes a massive strategic liability. Why did the Italian military fail so quickly? They had the numbers and the equipment, but leadership was non-existent. September 13, 1940. Italian forces invade Egypt from their bases in Libya. They move slowly. They stop to build camps and wait for supplies. The British response is swift. December 9, 1940. Operation Compass begins. A small British force strikes back and annihilates the entire Italian 10th Army. Events accelerated. Entire divisions surrender without a fight. Over 130,000 Italian soldiers become prisoners of war in just 2 months. The British lose less than 2,000 men. It is one of the most lopsided victories in the history of warfare. Adolf Hitler cannot ignore the collapse. In February 1941, Germany sends Erwin Rommel and the Afrika Korps to North Africa. Their mission is simple: prevent an Italian total defeat. But the failures continue. October 28, 1940. Italy invades Greece. It is a disaster from the start. The Greek army pushes the invaders back into Albania. They occupy 25% of Albanian territory. Mussolini's pride creates a new front that Germany never wanted. At first glance, a regional conflict, but in reality, a global turning point. April 6, 1941. Germany is forced to invade Yugoslavia and Greece to bail out the Italians. This intervention is costly. It delays Operation Barbarossa by 5 weeks. These are 5 weeks of precious summer weather that the German army will never get back. The delay changes the course of the world. Some historians argue this single shift cost Germany the entire war. Because of the Balkan campaign, German forces reached the outskirts of Moscow in December instead of early November. They arrived exactly when the Russian winter hit its peak. The resource drain was enormous. Germany threw 29 divisions into the Balkans. This included 6 of their 19 armored divisions and 1,200 of their 3,200 tanks. The footage shows columns of German Panzers stuck in Balkan mud while the clock ticks toward the Soviet winter. There was no turning back. Thus, the Mediterranean gamble became a death trap. Italy became a strategic black hole. Every theater of war where Italian troops failed required a German rescue mission. This pattern repeated in the Soviet Union, North Africa, and the Balkans. Instead of contributing to victory, Italy drained German fuel, equipment, and manpower. But this was not the case for Germany in the First World War. Consider the situation of Imperial Germany. Austria-Hungary faced internal crises, but they still fielded massive armies. For 4 straight years, they fought on multiple fronts against Russia, Italy, and Serbia. The Ottoman Empire was another active force. They tied down British and Russian divisions in the Caucasus and the Middle East for years. Nazi Germany's allies provided no such relief. They were either incapable of fighting or actively sabotaged the war effort through incompetence. By December 1941, the situation turned critical. The Soviet Union, Great Britain, and the United States formed a global front. Germany needed allies who could hold a line. They had none. The statistics are clear. In December 1941, the German offensive in Russia stalled. The German economy relied entirely on looted resources and slave labor. Their allies were a liability. Imperial Germany faced a similar dead end in 1918. Allies were collapsing, enemies were closing the circle, resources were gone. But the two Germanys reacted differently. One kept fighting for months under impossible pressure. The other would face a total catastrophic collapse within 3 years. Why was there such a gap? It came down to the foundation. Imperial Germany in 1914 was built for endurance. The industrial base was designed for a long war. Factories could produce millions of shells and sustain massive armies for years on end. The British blockade attempted to starve them out. It failed for years. German scientists synthesized ammonia for explosives. They engineered synthetic rubber substitutes. The state rationed food with brutal efficiency. They kept the machine running for 4 years against the combined power of Britain, France, Russia, and eventually the United States. The footage shows the reality. In 1914, the trains moved on time. In 1941, the logistics lines were breaking. But did the Nazi economy have the same depth? It did not. The system was built for a sprint, not a marathon. When the sprint failed, there was no plan for what came next. The state was hollow. September 1939. Nazi Germany was built for a sprint. The strategy required 6 to 8 weeks of high-intensity combat. 3 months was the absolute limit. After that, the machinery of war required fuel that the German state did not possess. To survive, they had to loot. Why was the Third Reich so fragile? At first glance, a military juggernaut, but in reality, a parasite. It needed a host. Poland falls first. The German administration immediately seizes coal, grain, and timber. France falls next. Germany takes the gold reserves, the steel factories, and the entire national economy. The first 2 years of World War II did not rely on German industrial output. They relied on systematic theft. June 22, 1941. Germany invades the Soviet Union. The High Command bets everything on a single rapid victory. They have no choice. The German economy cannot sustain a prolonged campaign of attrition. The footage shows columns of tanks moving east, fueled by stolen petrol. The bet fails. By 1945, the collapse is absolute. Compare this to Imperial Germany in 1918. At the end of World War I, the German state was exhausted, but it still functioned. The armies remained intact on foreign soil. Factories continued to produce shells. The collapse was political, triggered by strikes and naval mutinies. The military machine was not yet broken. But Nazi Germany in 1945 is a different picture. The camera records: total systemic failure. The military is disintegrated. The cities are piles of scorched brick. The economy has evaporated. The country itself ceases to exist as a legal entity. It was the same people. It was the same Prussian military tradition. But one system was built on economic reality. The other was built on a ticking time bomb. So which Germany was actually stronger? If the metric is technology and tactics at a single fixed moment, the Nazis win. In 1939, they possessed superior tanks and advanced aircraft. Their combined arms doctrine was revolutionary. But war is not a single moment. If the metric is the ability to fight and win a global conflict, Imperial Germany in 1914 was the superior power. It wasn't even close. Strength is not defined by the impact of the first punch. It is defined by the ability to remain standing when the fight enters the 12th round. The Third Reich ran out of breath. The end was inevitable. 1914. Hitler studied the First World War with a feverish obsession. He filled notebooks with data. He analyzed maps. He looked for one specific answer. Why did the German Empire fail? His conclusion was blunt: Germany was too passive. The generals fought a defensive war of inches. They allowed the front lines to freeze. They let the conflict turn into a meat grinder of attrition. Hitler decided Germany would never repeat that mistake. He ordered a complete redesign of the military. He didn't want a traditional army. He wanted a machine built for the knockout blow. The strategy had 3 pillars: strike first, strike fast, strike with everything. The goal was to seize enemy fuel, grain, and steel before German warehouses went empty. In 1939, the plan looked perfect. The footage shows the results: Panzers crossing the Polish border, Stuka dive bombers screaming over French villages. The visuals are consistent: burning tanks and surrendered soldiers. For 2 years, the gamble paid off. Poland fell in weeks. France collapsed in a month. Even the Soviet Union seemed ready to break during the first summer of the invasion. But a problem emerged. What happens when the enemy doesn't quit? Germany faced a reality they hadn't planned for. The blitzkrieg was a sprint, but the war became a marathon. You cannot win a 5-year conflict with a 6-month economy. Nazi industry ran on a deficit. They relied on stolen gold and slave labor. When the Red Army refused to collapse, the German system began to redline. The sound of factory gears grinding to a halt became the soundtrack of the Reich. The math was simple and brutal. One side could replace every lost tank. The other could not. One side had infinite oil. The other used synthetic coal gas. Real military power isn't just tactical brilliance on a map. It is production capacity. It is the ability to absorb 1,000 punches and stay standing. Imperial Germany understood the logistics of a long war. Nazi Germany ignored them. That is why the Kaiser lasted 4 years against a global coalition, while Hitler's empire shattered completely in 6. At first glance, Hitler was a genius of speed. But in reality, he was a gambler who ran out of chips. Consider the year 1939. You are a military planner. You have 2 choices. Option 1, build for speed. You aim for the quick knockout blow. You win fast or you die. Option 2, build for endurance. You prepare to lose battles, absorb hits, and outproduce the enemy over several years. Hitler chose the gamble. The Allies chose the grind. History recorded the winner. But in 1939, the choice wasn't obvious. Which strategy would you have signed off on, the high-speed risk or the long-term endurance? The answer defines how a nation survives. The facts show that understanding power requires looking at the balance sheet, not just the battlefield. The story of the Second World War ended in the factories of Detroit and the Urals, not just the bunkers of Berlin. Thus ended the dream of the Lightning War.